Here we go.
And then there's a couple that I was really
Yeah. I had like
really debating.
so I had a list of 8 at first. Then I eliminated 2 pretty quickly. But then like 15 minutes ago I remembered a team I was forgetting and
Oh,
that added into
really?
the mix. But then I like had 5 yeah, but so they ended up at 6. I just completely was I thought about them earlier in the day, but then when I was writing stuff down, I forgot to note it. And so,
The ordering was really tough for me.
mhm.
I did an extensive research process, though, I will say.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
I like that.
Dude, I start because I was kind of like, where do I even start with this? So I went through and looked up from since 2000 every Super Bowl champion and every um like top regular season team
Yeah.
just to kind of compare. I figured that was a good place to start.
Yeah. See, see, that's where I kind of have an advantage because I can tell you off the top of my head every Super Bowl in our lifetime.
This
Yeah.
is another one like the earlier ones that we did with like quarterbacks and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be interested to see what you think about my list
Yeah.
afterwards
Yeah.
because there are
Yeah.
some, I don't know, there might be some iffy ones on here. We're ranking so the best NFL teams individually, like individual seasons,
Yep.
um, since we were born, so since 2000.
Yeah. So basically the
Okay.
best like seasons from a team.
Yes. This was that
Individual.
was it was hard to come up with, honestly.
Yeah.
Because when we were thinking about it and going through and we're kind of like, how do we want to do this? And
Yeah, there's so many ways we could.
because initially I when you pitched it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then I'm like, wait a minute. If we're just doing like best teams, like I was like, our list could be very similar.
Right. If it
If we
like
just
if we're
it
gonna
was hard to ignore like, okay, the Patriots won 6 and this team won 2, or like
right.
it'd
So
be
if we're just
hard to
talking cumulative
deviate. Yeah.
like over the totality of the past 23 years or whatever. Like obviously the Patriots are one,
Right.
and there's only a couple teams that have won multiple Super Bowls, so it's hard
Right.
to ignore that. Like,
hmm
but
I think this
this,
is a much more interesting.
yeah, this will be
This could
interesting.
go in so many directions too.
All right, who do I want to mention first? Okay, I'll go with the 2003 Patriots.
I almost had them. I didn't put them on though, just because I don't remember them enough.
That's fair. Okay, so
But
I have,
they were literally a last minute. Like there was two other teams I wanted to put on there,
yeah,
and I had to pick one to take off. So I just was like, I don't really remember the '03 Pats.
yeah, that's fine. That's acceptable. So I have them at 3.
Okay.
Came really close to having them at 4, um, but I'll settle at 3. Um, So this is right, Brady's second championship. This is really the start of like the Patriots run of dominance. Patriots
Mhm.
win in 01, but then they missed the playoffs the next year. And then 2003, they go 14-2. Um, they had the best defense in the NFL. They only gave up 238 points on the season, which I have a lot of numbers. So as we go, 238 points
Okay.
allowed is like very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Um, the offense wasn't great at the time, so that is kind of the one knock. But the thing about them that put them over the edge for me is that they won. So they went 14-2, but they won the last 12 games of the regular season, then obviously won the 3 games
hmm
through the playoffs. Um, and over this year and the next year, they set the record for most consecutive wins ever. Um,
hmm
and so I just look at like the way they finished the season. After week 4, they didn't lose. So it's like
Yeah.
they were just so dominant for so long down the stretch. Um,
After getting shut out in week 1.
After getting shut out in week 1, which is crazy.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things like in NFL history is the fact that they lost 31-0 to the Bills in Buffalo week 1. And then the last game of the season, they beat them 31-0.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Really
That is
weird.
that is strange.
Yeah. I don't like, yeah, you probably won't ever find where like a blowout is mirrored perfectly, literally
hmm
week 1 and week 17.
Right.
Um, But the stretch of dominance they had to end that season was just incredible. And their defense was so good. Um, later championships, there was much more of the balance where great offense, great defense. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, defense wins championships, and that run is just too hard to ignore. So I got him at 3.
Yep, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with another defensive team
Okay.
just to kind of build on that, and maybe you'll have them. But this is honestly, there was two teams that in my head I knew were going to be on here for me, and this was one of them. The
Okay.
2013 Seahawks.
Hey. Okay.
Okay.
I told you I had forgotten about a team
Yeah,
that this was them. I
really.
if we did top 10, I would have them 6, and it's like
Okay.
real close.
Yeah, this was, I think I had to have them on here because I just remember, like, I don't vividly remember watching them, but I can remember just all the watching Sports Center and stuff, and it was just like they were like steamrolling teams, like,
The Legion of Boom.
yeah, just an unbeatable defense, and then to go into the Super Bowl. And I think, was this the one that we watched together, you, me, and Chris? Maybe.
I don't know. I
I
know
don't remember if it was
we
this
watched the
one or the
Broncos
next
Panthers
one.
Super Bowl
Okay,
together.
that's what it was then. So I remember this one. Um, we were like getting pizza, my family, like I think we were ordering out pizza, which we never really do, but
Yeah.
the pizza was ready pretty much as the game was about to start. My dad left to get the pizza, came back. I'm like, Dad, it's like 14 to or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like this game is already blown wide
It's getting
open.
ugly quick.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of the most dominating performances I've seen in a
Yeah.
Super Bowl, where it was just, and it
And
was
and that
so
was
hyped up too. It was
that was
like
the best offense of all
yeah,
time that they
this
beat. So
great offense versus the defense. What's going to happen? Who's going to win? And it was no question.
yeah.
So
And that was a great, like, insane team. The
yeah,
Legion of Boom, that defense with Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor at safety. Richard Sherman's obviously like
and
at the
Bobby
corner.
Wagner, was he on? He was on that team, right? Or
Yeah, I think he
middle
was
there.
young. Then Michael Bennett on the D line. And who was
Hmm.
it? There's someone, the
I think,
MVP. The
yeah, who
MVP
won
was a
MVP?
linebacker, but it wasn't Wagner.
Right.
I
I don't
forget
remember who it was.
forget
It
it.
was like an
But it's
outside
just, I mean, the
linebacker, I
fact
think.
that you name all those guys and then the MVP of the game was a
A rare
defensive player not.
defensive MVP too.
Yes, very
Yeah.
rare.
But I just remember that team being so dominant. Like
They were,
when I think of dominant NFL teams, they are probably the one that sticks out to
yeah.
me.
So where do
Just
you have
because
them?
of where I was in my NFL fandom at that point. Like I was still kind of paying attention to
Yeah.
it a lot more than I am now. And so I have them at number 2 because of how much they stick out to me. And
Okay.
that Super Bowl victory. Just like, I mean, you play at that point, you're supposedly playing the second best team in the league, or the other, you're the 2 best teams in the league playing. So when it's a blowout like that, it just is like, yikes.
Yeah. It's tough.
Okay. So
Why?
far we've each gotten each other's 6th place team.
Yep.
We're
That's
just
crazy.
missing.
All right. So I'll go with the team I have at 4. So this is the one that was really close with L3 Pats, and it's the 2017 Eagles.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I did not even really consider them.
All right.
I
So
I just remember them being, from what I remember of them, it was more just like a how does this team keep winning kind of thing.
so I mean, they from the start of the season were just so good. They had a
Okay.
little bit of that in the playoffs because Nick Foles
Right.
leading them right where Carson Wentz played. I don't know the exact number of games he played, but I think it was like 13. So he played the majority
Okay.
of the season.
I do not remember that. I
Yeah.
thought Foles had to come in way earlier, to be
No,
honest.
no, it was pretty much they went 13-3.
Right.
They were third in the league in scoring, and they were fourth in the league in points allowed, um, which is not common that you have a team top 5 in both.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things when I was looking for criteria of like these teams, what sets them apart. Um, there's a lot of teams that will be really dominant on one end of the ball, but then just like either mediocre to bad on the other end.
Yeah.
Um, and so any team that is really high offensively and defensively, that gives them a big boost to me. And as much as they finished the last couple of games of the year poorly with Nick Foles, and everyone was kind of like, okay, like everyone counted them out once the playoffs came because they just thought Foles was bad.
Hmm.
Squeak past the divisional round. It was a close game against the Falcons, and then they just pummeled the Vikings 38-7 in the NFC Championship. Like it was just dominant. And then they come out and they put up, 50 something on the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And the Patriots were supposed to have at least a good defense. It like they were such a fun team to watch. The way they went down and won, the fact that they like plugging in their backup quarterback were still a dominant team, I think shows just how well rounded their group was as a whole. You know what I mean? Like they had good
Yeah.
running backs, had great offensive line play, had some solid receivers. Zach Ertz is a great tight end. And then defensively, they were really good. They were so great in all facets of the game. And finishing 13-3, I think like they started 13-1, I think. So they were such a good team. So I slot them in at number 4.
Yeah, maybe that's an oversight on my part. I obviously remember that Super Bowl and stuff. I just, for some reason, when I thought of that team, it was just like, they're a team that kind of went against the odds almost. So I was kind of like, no,
Yeah.
they're not going to be on my list.
Yeah. I think up until Wentz was hurt, like they were like this
Yeah.
team's best team in the league was kind of the attitude.
Which is
And
absolutely ridiculous if you think about it now, to think that a team with Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback would have that narrative.
if he didn't get hurt, he would have won MVP though. That's
Yeah.
what's insane. Like he was playing unbelievably.
No, he used to be a great quarterback, and then it all just
Yeah. I mean,
fell
he's so
apart.
talented, but at some point he just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a shame.
All right. Where do you have them? 4, you said?
4. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure where I want to go with this next one.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go for one that maybe you have on there. I don't know how Patriots heavy you went.
Okay.
I threw the 2016 Patriots on there.
Okay. Where'd you put him?
I have them at number 3.
Okay.
Reason I have them at number 3, similar a little bit to like the Seahawks and how they dominated the Super Bowl. Patriots went in 14-2 into the playoffs, and then their first 2 playoff rounds, the divisional and the AFC Championship. I mean, based on the scores, I don't remember them vividly watching them, but based on the scores, not much trouble at all. Kind of walked to the Super Bowl. Obviously, that's a super, super famous Super Bowl for the 28-3.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could say, well, they only won the Super Bowl in overtime. But you could also look at it as they basically didn't play for a half of football
Mm-hmm.
and won beat an NFC champion in like one half, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that could show you when they turned it on, that team was crazy. The other thing, like you were saying about, Nick Foles and with the backup quarterback, this was the Deflategate year with this
Mm-hmm.
Tom Brady suspension. So they started 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
So, playing with Jimmy G and Jacoby Brissett to go 3-1, it says something about just how good the rest of the team was. Because I don't think if you plug Jimmy G or Brissett in now on a team, you're not expecting them to go 3-1 necessarily.
Right. Yeah. It's a great pick. I have them at number 1. And this
Whoa.
easily
Wow.
at number 1 for me.
Really? You think that's the best program, the best
Don't
roster of
let
our lifetime?
let me go in. I'll tell you why. First of all, right, this team is like this is just a historic season because it's Brady coming back off of Deflategate, like you mentioned. So the build up is insane. So 14-2. There's no team has won a Super Bowl with a better record in our lifetime, right? Like there's been
Really?
yeah.
I didn't catch that when I was organizing my list.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
the Patriots have done it 3 times. No other
Yeah.
team has won but 14 or more.
Okay.
Every team there's been a couple 15-1 teams, a couple other
Panthers.
14-2s. None of them won the Super Bowl.
Okay.
They went 11-1 with Brady, right? In that stretch of 12 games, they lost to the Seahawks and they lost by 4, I think, and they were at the goal line. So we were right there, this close to winning that game, but they lost. Of the 11 games that they won, only 2 of them were within 1 score. So they were like They were just rolling through teams. They
Okay.
were plus 191 on the season in point differential. They were the best defensive scoring team. So first in points allowed. They
Hmm.
were third in points for. And if Brady played the whole season, like they easily would have been second because we got shut out by the Bills with Jacoby Brissett. When Brady played against the Bills, we put up 42.
Okay.
We're like just dominant. And you think about how well rounded this team was. Like defensively, obviously we're stacked. We had so many good
Hmm.
pieces, but offensively, Brady sets the record for touchdown interception ratio.
Yeah.
You can argue this is, I mean, outside of '07 probably, but like there's an argument this is the best football he ever played was this year.
Hmm.
Um, we had so many weapons, but then we also LeGarrette Blount ran for 18 touchdowns this
Yeah,
year.
he was a beast.
Like ran for I think
He
1,100
was an
yards, 18
animal.
touchdowns. So it's like we could do it through the air, we could do it on the ground. Our defense was unstoppable. And like you mentioned, the divisional conference round of the playoffs, we just rolled through the Texans and then Steelers.
Hmm.
Um, and it literally like we only won in overtime, but it's the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. And
Right.
like you mentioned, it literally like any team can have a bad half. And like our offense was just moving. We just had a couple turnovers in their territory that just killed us. Um, but then in the second half, I mean, we demolished them. Right. So if you look
Yeah.
at, they played basically six halves of football in the playoffs. Five of the six were just like they're
Right.
just rolling through teams. Um, this is my favorite season ever as a fan of like any team. Watching this team was incredible, and so I have them at one.
Okay.
It's just hard to see a weakness. Like if Brady's healthy, they easily go 15-1. And like we're
Okay.
not losing to the Bills. They beat us 16-0, and it's because we had a Jacoby Brissett who couldn't grip a
Hmm.
football because he like destroyed his hand basically. He had an injury in here, so he like couldn't squeeze with his thumb. But
Hmm.
Jimmy G wasn't willing to play because he had a little bit of an injury. So like that team was so dominant. So
I feel very justified then because I was debating between this Patriots and a different one that I
yeah,
won't say just in case you
yeah,
happen to go very Pats heavy.
yeah.
And I ended up at the very last second choosing the 2016 over the other one that I was thinking
Okay.
of. So
There,
that vindicates that choice a little bit, I
there
think.
you go. They're phenomenal.
All right.
So all
What's
right. So we
what's your
have
next one? So we
so
have
we have
your one,
3 and 4.
3 and 4. Okay.
And what do
We
we
have
have for
two and
you? We
five.
have 2, 3.
2 and 3.
Okay.
We're gone.
All right. Do you want to just go next then?
Yeah,
Since I
sure. We
think.
could go another one of mine. I'll go one that you probably don't have, just to
Okay.
kind of get out of the way. I felt like for my personal brand, I needed to have this on here, um, because of how much I use it in certain arguments. Do you know what it's going to be?
I don't know.
I have the 2020 Buccaneers
Oh, yes. Okay. I should have guessed
because
that.
I always say
I should have
I
guessed
always
that.
say, when you're looking at Tom Brady's career, this one is only like a half a point basically because of how good this team was. But this is another one similar to the Seahawks where I just remember watching this Super Bowl and not like you could have disregarded the Buccaneers offense basically. Like the Chiefs were not winning this Super Bowl.
Hmm.
There was just no like what the defense did was so impressive to me
Hmm.
that this team was just an absolute juggernaut. But then not only that, you also think about like the offensive roster. So you have Tom Brady at quarterback.
Hmm.
Then running back, you have Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, who was good at the time, right?
Hmm.
He was that was a solid duo, especially because
Hmm.
Fournette was going
Yeah.
crazy in the
Fournette was great
playoffs.
in those playoffs.
That's when he, for some reason, just started to like kind of figure it out and became
Yeah.
a serviceable running back for like a year and a half.
Yeah. Pretty much.
um, but then wide receiver, you have Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Then you also have Cameron Brate and Gronk at tight end. Like the weapons on that team
There's a lot of names.
were
First of all,
insane.
you do always do this thing though. Let's not act like Cameron Brate was some like
He was a
dog
solid
effort.
tight end
He
though.
was solid.
He
And
was a solid. He
Gronk
wasn't Travis Kelce, but for him to be your second tight end,
was
like
pretty good.
that's a luxury, I
Yeah.
would say.
And that Gronk was not like
He wasn't
Gronk.
prime Gronk, but he was still Gronk.
Yeah.
He
But
was. I think. I mean, granted, I'm not no NFL expert here, but I will say like even when Gronk came back, I would have probably trusted him in like the top 5 tight ends in the league at the time. Like if you were to give me, if you were to say like, here are name 5 tight ends that you would rather have over
mhm,
Gronk right now, I probably would not have been able to do it.
mhm.
So just the names on that team, and then the defense was nuts. So I had to throw them on there. It would have been disingenuous if I had not put them on there, but I figure they're not on your list.
Where do you have him?
I have them at the 5th spot.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't
If
go nuts with it. I was like, I'll just slide them in there at the very bottom just to get them in there, basically.
yeah. Well, if we did a top 10 list, they might have made my list. There certainly wouldn't have been my top 8, but
Yeah.
they are a great team. And I mean, you look at the roster, it's very impressive. My thing with
Mhm.
them is that they won 11 games.
Right.
And once they seemed to figure things out, they were really, really good down the
Yeah.
stretch. But it's hard for me to pick them over a team that just was really good start to finish. You know what I
100%.
mean?
Yeah.
And then the
100%.
one other thing, if you're nitpicking, is the fact that they won every playoff game like by a narrow margin until the Super Bowl, where they just blew the
Right.
Chiefs out of
They
the water.
didn't dominate the playoffs really.
Like they played a pretty close game against Washington in the wild card round,
Hmm.
and then won. I guess the Saints one might have even ended up being like a 10-point game actually.
Yeah.
But
Saints,
it
they
was
beat Saints 30-20, and then they beat the Packers by 5.
right.
But
So
they
the Saints,
also were one of, I mean, I kept seeing this pop up on various teams' season summary. They were one of the few teams to beat 3 Super Bowl winners consecutively.
yeah, no, the teams they went through
Yeah.
was really
So
impressive, right?
I
Um,
kept seeing that pop up on a number of teams.
yeah, I mean, because they're the Saints and Packers were so good, and then
Yeah.
the Chiefs were the defending champions at the time.
Right.
So they're a great team, just because of the 11-5, like the late start to the season,
Yeah.
because they started 7-5, and people were like, "Oh, like is this team just not going to be as good as we thought?" And then they just
Right.
started
They just needed to
destroying.
kind of
They
figure
started
it out.
destroying teams.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I think of it similarly to the way I think of like that 2016 Patriots with the second half of the Super Bowl kind of thing. Like
mhm,
it, judge them on their best, and at their best, they were
really
a
good.
juggernaut.
Yeah, that's very fair. Very fair.
So they're my 5.
Okay. Well, we got 1, 3, and 4 for me. I'll go at number 5 next. Save
Okay.
2. I have the 2009 Saints.
Whoa, no way. I didn't think you were gonna have them. I have them too. I have them
Okay,
at
I like
4.
it. So the one thing that gave me hesitations, their defense wasn't very good.
Hmm.
Um, the Saints just Sean Payton is one of the greatest offensive coaches ever, maybe the best. Um, I swear I don't think he ever stepped in a defensive meeting room in his life. Like I think he hired a defense.
Except to call the bounty.
Yeah, exactly. So um, the thing that's insane about this team is they scored 510 points on the season. Um, Teams that have scored 500 or more, I think there's only 3 of them ever that have won a Super Bowl. And 2 of them were before the 2000s. So it's just defense wins championships is a legitimate thing, right? Like
Hmm.
you'll see a lot of teams that have great defenses and mediocre offenses win a Super Bowl. You don't see it much the other way around. But the Saints were just that good. Like they were just destroying teams. They're plus 169 on the season. And if you remember, they went 13-3, but they started 13-0,
Yeah.
and they lost a really close game to the Cowboys. And then I think like they had the 1 seed locked up. So I don't remember if they rested players the last 2 weeks. I'm sure they did the last week, but it was like
Right.
they just were destroying teams. You remember them and the Colts both started 13-0.
Hmm.
And it was like, are we gonna have the first time ever where there's two undefeated teams and then they like play each other in
That
the
would have
Super?
been nuts. Yeah.
And then the Saints lost the last three, the Colts lost their last two. So didn't end up happening. But in the playoffs, so they're the one seed, they played divisional, conference, and then Super Bowl. They scored like 100+ points between
Hmm.
those three games. Like that offense was just so good.
Yeah.
Drew Brees was incredible. Um, that offense is just like it was just genius too, the way they constructed it. Because you look at who they had, there's not a lot of stellar names. Like Marquise Colston was
Right.
their number one receiver, who's a good player.
Hmm.
But then they had, I mean, Reggie Bush is like a big name, but he
Yeah.
wasn't even their starting back. So they were just so fun to watch. Their offense was just too dominant to me to ignore it. And so I slid them into that 5 spot.
Yeah. So I have them at 4. For me, it was they were the two them and the Bucks were the two that I knew I wanted to get in, so I had to bump out the '03 Patriots.
Mm.
And I'm not exactly sure what it was about them, but I just remember this Saints team being so good.
Hmm.
And I remember that Super Bowl, truly being like these are the best two teams in the league, and
Hmm.
they won. And it was a great game too.
Hmm.
And I that for some reason that just called to me and was like, you got to put them in here because it
Hmm.
was literally just they it wasn't like they got an easy ride to the Super Bowl and beat the 4 seed or something. What like
Hmm.
they just beat every team that got in their way basically and emphatically won it in the end.
Yeah.
And I think it also was a almost like a cumulative pick a little bit because the Saints were great for a number of years. They had that great offense. Like,
Yeah.
Drew Brees was absolutely electric as a tiny quarterback. And
Yeah.
so I just remember the Saints being such a good team, and obviously this is the one they won. So I was kind
Hmm.
of like, okay, I'll throw that season in there
Yeah.
because that's their best one.
And it's just, I think, an underappreciated, like the Saints in general, I feel like are just underappreciated how good
Yeah,
they were, how good Breeze was, how good of a coach Sean Payton was. So
right.
to me, it's a disservice to ignore this team.
Yeah, I would agree. I wonder why that is. Like, because they
Yeah.
were there for so many years. They just couldn't really break through a lot of those years, and this was
Yeah.
the one that they did.
Yeah. They're incredibly unlucky. And like, I'm gonna botch the years, but I think they're the only team ever to go 13-3. And this is back before there was a 17 playoff,
Yeah.
17. So it used to be the 1 and 2 seed both get a bye. Um, they're the only team ever to go 13-3 and not get that bye.
Wow.
And it
Yeah.
happened to them twice.
That's crazy.
It happened in like, I'm gonna say 2011 and then 2018.
Okay.
Um, or no, not 2018. 2019, I think. I don't know, one of
Okay.
those. Yeah, 2019 when the Packers and 49ers got above them. It was just like they had so many good teams and they also had a lot of really bad defenses
Yeah.
that like they'd have a historically
Once
good.
once they figured out the bounty, once their players weren't allowed to get paid for injuries anymore, the
They
defense
struggled,
went
yeah.
downhill.
Because they literally in the 2010s, like they had some offenses that could be in the conversation as like best offenses ever, but they'd
Mhm.
go like 7-9 because their defense was just that bad. They had one year their
Yeah.
defense gave up 7 yards a play or
The
something
average,
like
yeah.
that,
Wow.
which is like you can't win if your defense
Hmm.
gives up 7 a play. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay, so that's my 4, your 5. So we've done now my 2 through 5.
yep. I have number 2 left. You got number
You have
1
two
left.
left. Okay. Do you want to go with your 2 first?
Sure.
Because I think my 1 is a hot take. I'll say that.
Oh no. Oh no. All
Go
right,
ahead. Go ahead.
my 2 is the 04 Patriots.
Okay. Not that that's not my 1.
I'll talk. Okay,
This
now
is
I'm
gonna be
nervous.
interesting. I
Now,
don't think
now,
this is gonna be Empire Strikes Back interesting, but it's gonna be an interesting take for
yeah,
sure.
you're stressing me out just saying that. All right, the reason I have 04 Patriots,
Uh-huh.
I have the 04 and 03 2-3, and I kind of struggle with who to choose to go first. The thing about 03 was that they won the last 15. So once they got in a rhythm, they just were rolling. But 04 was just such a incredible team. Again, they went 14-2. Their two losses where they lost to the Steelers, who actually went 15-1 that year.
I
And they
saw
lost
that.
to the Dolphins in Miami because for some reason
Yep.
the Patriots just can't help but
Who
do it.
knows?
Brady threw one of the worst interceptions you'll ever see in that game against the Dolphins. I know you're a Brady hater, so if you want to look that one up in your free
I
time, you'd
will.
enjoy it.
I might.
So this is one of, the 2017 Eagles and the 16 Patriots are the only other two teams that are top 5 in scoring offense and points allowed on defense. They were 4th offensively, 2nd defensively, and they were plus 177 on the season in points. So they were just dominating teams from start to finish of the season. They probably started like 6-0, I think. Lost to Steelers, and then it was like they were fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then in their playoff run, they played the Colts in the divisional round, the Steelers in the conference championship, and then the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Steelers are 15-1. 04 Colts. I think that's the year Manning set the touchdown record at the time. So that offense was supposed to be unstoppable. They beat the Colts 20-3. And then I forget the score of the Steelers, but they destroyed them too in Pittsburgh. So it's just like they just went against these great teams and it was like nothing. They just killed them and then went and beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And that was kind of a weird one because it was like close, but also never super intense. So to me, they're just their offense is when Brady really like the offense was starting to click. They had Corey Dillon, so they had a real threat on the ground, and then their defense was still as good as those early 2000s defenses always were. So gotta go at 2. Patriots heavy at the top, but
The Patriots were a tough one, I feel like choosing which Patriots ones to include was tough because they had those periods where and they were largely the same players on the teams as well. Like even
03,
when I
04
was
really
so
hard.
the other one I'll say now because we know it's not on yours. The one I was deciding between was 2016 and 2014.
Yeah.
Because similar to like I said about the Saints, the 2014 was Patriots were the best team in the AFC, the Seahawks were the best team in the NFC. They met, the Patriots beat them, and it's similar, pretty much similar to 2016. Like the Patriots didn't have any trouble with anyone else basically. And when I was looking at those rosters, it was just like tiny differences that were different too.
Yeah.
So they're tough to differentiate, but I'm not very surprised. How many Patriots do you have on yours?
I have 3. I have
3.
16, 04, and then 03 in my top 3 spots.
Okay.
The 14 Patriots are really good, but like in my honorable mentions, I don't have them. It was kind of tough, but that's just because I mean, they were 12-4. They were really good, but they had some bad losses early. And I mean, their 4th loss was last game of the season. They didn't play the starters the whole game. But I will say, you mentioned they dominated the AFC Championship, but divisional round was a tough game against the Ravens.
Ravens, right?
That was a weird one because they're the only team in NFL history to overcome 2 14-point deficits in a game. Because it was like Ravens go up 14-0, then we come back and tie it. Then they went up 28-14, then we came back and tied it. That was if you remember the play where Edelman threw a touchdown to Amendola.
Yes.
Play, that was that game. So this team, like
that was a really good Ravens era though. Those Ravens teams were solid.
Yeah. I mean, we played them in the playoffs, 2011, 12, and then 14. Beat them twice, but every game was really close. So yeah.
All right.
I'm so scared.
This might be really, really bad, but I had to do it. Number 1, I have, and this is going to be super controversial. I have the only team on either of our lists that did not win a Super Bowl. I have the 07 Patriots.
Okay, that's not that controversial. Well, I
But
was
in the
scared that
sense
you
that
were.
we listed off 9 teams here or whatever, 9 spots, and not all of them won the Super Bowl. You know, they went 18-0 and then lost a game by like 4 points or something.
Mhm,
Like, I kind of like obviously it's the wrong game to lose. It's the one game that you can't lose.
mhm.
Um, but the domination with this team. I mean, and also I just remember like watching them, and it was like that the thing that made the Super Bowl stink was that it seemed impossible for them to lose at the time just because of how
Mhm,
good they were.
mhm,
And so, and looking at this roster, Tom Brady, prime like prime Tom Brady.
yeah,
Running backs are a little shaky, but like Lawrence Maroney was a solid back at
yeah,
the time. He was
yeah.
solid. Wide receivers, Troy Brown is a big name, kind of getting near the end of his career, but still
Patriots
Troy
Hall of
Brown,
Famer,
still
like.
Troy Brown. Randy Moss,
Mhm.
you know, prime Randy Moss, basically.
Set the
You could,
touchdowns record.
Randy Moss has kind of that. He's sort of similar in my eyes to like Kobe Bryant, where you have like the young Randy Moss that was balling out, but then you also have like veteran Randy Moss that was a different kind of receiver who was,
Mhm,
and both of
mhm,
them could be considered prime. But you have Randy Moss,
mhm,
record-setting season. You have Wes Welker, kind of in his prime as well. Like
mhm.
he was a beast in the slot. I don't know why, but I remember Dante Stallworth being a solid player. I remember
Yeah,
Jabbar Gaffney being a solid receiver. Like nothing crazy, but
yeah.
solid receivers. You have Big Ben Watson at the tight end. He was
Mhm,
a beast. I mean,
mhm,
super athletic tight end as well. I just remember him being unreal. You had the legend Matt Light on the offensive
mhm.
line. Logan Mankins on the offensive line. Like
Great O
names
line.
were like, as someone who is not a huge football guy, the amount of names that just stand out when I'm looking through this roster is crazy.
I mean, you
Defensive
think about the
line, you have
defense too.
Richard Seymour, Ty Warren, and Vince Wilfork on your line.
Mhm,
You have Asante Samuel at the cornerback position, Brandon Merriweather, Ellis Hobbs, Rodney Harrison, Randall Gay, I believe, was pretty solid.
mhm,
Mike Vrabel, Junior Seau, and Teddy Bruschi. Like,
mhm.
imagine you line up as the quarterback and you see, I don't know what kind of formation they were running in those days, but imagine you look up and you see either a 4-3 or a 3-4, and six of those seven are Richard Seymour, Ty Warren, Vince Wilfork, Mike Vrabel, Junior Seau, and Teddy Bruschi. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
This team was insane. Then you got Gostowski kicking.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know. It was. I mean, I understand they didn't win the Super Bowl, but this is like the best team that I've ever seen play football.
Yeah.
They just happened to lose the wrong game, basically.
This is the only thing. This is the thing I'll say. I thought about it, and if we did top 10, like they're in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, winning the Super Bowl is the most important thing. That's why all these
Right.
teams play. So losing the Super Bowl is really it's a big negative,
Yep,
right?
of
Like,
course.
I mean, if you look at it cumulatively, the 16, 03, and 04 Patriots, they all went 17 and 2.
Yep.
Oh, 07 Patriots went 18 and 1. So at the end of
Right.
the day, their record was only marginally better. They also, the other thing is the fact that they did not look overly impressive in the playoffs, which I
Okay.
don't think most people remember because they played the Jaguars. I forget this. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was like 30-20 or something. So it's like, all right, we beat the Jaguars. Then we played the Chargers, who were good, but not great. And we won 21-12. Brady threw 3 picks. Like Brady played awful. And it was just one of those games that, like, okay, they won, and it wasn't necessarily super close, but it was just kind of. And if you hear them talk about it, like the play, like Brady talk about that game, he was like, "Man, we just like they didn't play well. They didn't play like that team had looked."
Now what happened in the playoffs? Like,
I don't get it. This is the thing, and for some reason, the Giants seem to have their number.
right.
Like they figured out a formula because they barely lost the Patriots the last game of the year. We won
Mm-hmm.
by 3, and obviously the Giants beat us by 3. Um, but it really at the end of the day was just their defensive line was able to harass Brady.
Yeah.
Um, and especially at that time in his career, right? That's what people would say. It was like if you can consistently hit Brady, you can win, like you can beat him.
Oh,
You,
he used to be brutal with like pressure. I feel
yeah,
like he hasn't done it as much recently, especially since he went to the Bucks. I don't know what it's been, but I just remember he used to. My dad and I used to make fun of him all the time because it was like guys would get somewhat close to him and he'd just turtle and
yeah,
like the play would be over. And
yeah,
it would be situations where it was like, okay, that guy didn't even end up, he was threatening and then your lineman ended up shielding him off and he didn't get to you, but you quit on the play,
yeah. It
basically.
was it was bad, and everybody knew it at the time.
Hmm.
Like if you give Brady time, he's the best quarterback in the league. It's not even
Right.
close, right? I mean, Manning was good, but that year especially.
Yeah.
Um, but when they got to him, created problems. So it's just the fact that they didn't look dominant in the playoffs, even when they won, then they
Yeah.
lose the Super Bowl is a thing. But part of it is just that season upsets me so much to think about. Um,
Yeah.
and so there is one stat I want to share though, because it just shows how absurd it was.
Yeah.
So I got point differentials for all these teams that I shared. Um, so every team except for the '03 Pats wasn't that great, but '04 Pats plus 177, '09 Saints plus 169, '17 Eagles plus 162, right? So a lot like mid 100s are good. The 16 Patriots were plus 191 was really good. Um, and I think that 13 Broncos offense and actually the 19 Ravens were just over 200 plus
Okay.
200. Um, but it's really rare in our lifetime you'll see a team plus 200. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if there's more than those two. 100 like 50 plus is really good.
Hmm.
The Patriots in 2007 were plus 315.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Like that's insane. You know, like
It really is so upsetting because it was like it's literally, you know, three three points, 3 points away from a season that will probably never be touched by any team ever, even if another team were to go undefeated, like to the
right.
extent that they did it,
They
another team
just
probably won't do it. But just the wrong game.
they made football look so easy. Um, but they did have, as much as they went undefeated, the second half of the season, you could see some signs of like they slowed
Hmm.
down a little. Um, like I think Brady threw 37 touchdowns in the first 9 games,
Wow. Yeah.
and then he finished with 50 over 16, right? Which is
Yeah.
still like really good.
Right.
Like his last 7 games are still really good. Um, but it just the way that season started, I just remember it was like
Yeah.
it's like nothing you'll ever see in football. It
Yeah.
was so crazy. Um,
Yeah.
well,
So that was my hot take there. It's just too like I don't know. I'm kind of a big right. I'm a big Premier League fan, and after watching the way that they do it, obviously playoffs are super exciting. I'm a huge fan of tournaments,
yeah.
um, just in general. Like I just love tournaments, creating my own fake tournament, whatever. Like I
Mhm.
love tournaments, but for the purposes of knowing who the best teams are when we're doing something like this, it's just like that style makes so much more sense because you get in a situation like this, right? Where
Mhm.
so the Giants are the Super Bowl champs, but they played the Patriots twice and they were 1-1. It just happened that the Giants won the bigger game.
Mhm.
Similar to Georgia's first of their back-to-back championships where Alabama beat them in the SEC championship, but then Georgia won the national championship. So now they're 1-1 against each other, but Georgia gets to claim that they were the better team because they won the national championship. It's like the playoffs
Yeah.
create tough situations like that.
It
And
is
for it
when
to
you're
be a
looking at the
3 point
best.
loss, like
Yeah. It's this is my friend. I have a friend that and I would argue about it a ton because he's a big soccer fan, and
hmm
he argues like the table is better because it is the most accurate way to see who like
right.
the best team was.
Yeah,
Um, and it obviously like playoffs are more exciting, but I
exactly.
do also think there's something to it where like the best teams are the ones that will win when it's the highest pressure, right?
There's
So
something to be said for that. Yeah.
because like in a table, you have a team that just starts the first 10 games of the season really poorly, or they're just really
Hmm.
struggling, but they have injuries early or something. It's like you might just no matter what not be able to come back. To me, it's like who at the end of the season when all the pressure's on, like you against the best teams available, can you prevail?
Yeah.
But I understand both
What I
sides.
will say, like I do agree with that to an extent, but I
Mhm,
will say that a counter to that would be from I mean, we're not we didn't grow up playing like that
mhm,
style of sport, whatever. But one of the big things that always comes up whenever a team like Arsenal this year or Leicester in 2016
mhm,
um, is the most impressive thing about teams that win the league like that is the fact that they were able to see it over the line because I guess towards the end of the season, it starts getting really like you almost get that same pressure on
mhm,
every game, even if you're playing a lower team, right? Because if it's a close race like that,
mhm,
every single point matters. And,
mhm.
it could be a case of you tie 1-1 and that could be you need an extra goal to
Yeah,
win the league kind of thing. But I do hear you there. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
There's just a different sort of pressure when it's like the best
yeah,
against the best. Both of their seasons are on the line,
yeah.
right? Like, not that, if,
Especially
man,
something like the Super Bowl where it's such a spectacle too. Like you have
right,
2 weeks building up to it. There's a
right,
ton of pressure that gets
right.
put on that
Like, who
one
knows?
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Man City might play some team that's like middle of the table late this year that has big implications. Like the pressure is going to be high for that game.
Right.
And whoever they're playing, is going to want to beat them, of course. And
Hmm.
they're going to see that and be like, we want to be the ones to end their season. But you're not going to have the same fire behind that team as a team that's like, no, if we win, like, then we are the champs,
Yeah.
then our
Yeah.
season
Fair.
continues. So it just, um, but it like, I can see the pros and cons to both.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think my favorite sports growing up in the United States, like all have the playoffs. So it's just kind of, it's what I've
Right.
always
It's
had.
what
It's
we're
what I
used to
love.
over here.
Like I wouldn't ever want to change it, but I also would never suggest the Premier League change because it's like that's what the
Right.
Premier League is, right? So
Right. It works for them.
yeah, but all right, what were a couple of your honorable mentions?
So I had the '03 Pats on there, and
Yeah.
then other ones. Where were they? Trying to look here. 14 Pats we talked about.
Mhm.
Um, who else was here? The 2019 Chiefs, I feel like were a similar, like, they were just talked about all season.
Mhm.
That was kind of Mahomes' real, like, he was a star already, but like, you know, it was after that season, it was like, how many of these is he going to win,
Yeah.
basically?
Yeah.
Who's going to stop him? And then
Mhm.
that's kind of died down a little bit after they failed to do anything the next 2 years to win anything. But
Yeah.
um, I had them up there. And then I think the only other one I was considering was actually um
Loss.
another loss was the 0-1 Rams. Just because
Oh,
of basically because of how much I've heard from you about them and just like how good that team was. Um, but I don't really remember them, and again, it's a loss, so it's harder to
yeah.
justify.
Yeah. That team was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My honorable mentions, I had the 13 Seahawks, I had the 19 Chiefs as well. And then I had the '07 Patriots.
Hmm.
The one other honorable mention that would have been a hot take, but I just couldn't get myself to bring it. But I do think they belong in the conversation that I don't think most people would talk about is the 2002 Buccaneers.
I thought about that as well, actually.
So obviously the reason that people will forget about them is because Brad Johnson was their quarterback, and
Hmm.
offensively they were just so like they weren't good. But they were like 18th in the league in scoring that year. Um, but their defense also scored a lot, so that
Yeah.
helps. but they gave up 12.3 points a game, which is fourth best since they made the season 16 games.
Hmm.
So in a 16 game season, they gave up less than 200 points. Like that is crazy. You know how
Right.
dominant it is. Um, you think about like that Seahawks defense that we think about as being crazy. I think they gave up like 230 something points.
Yeah, 231.
Um, yeah, the 15 Broncos, which we talk about a lot, is a great defense. That was still around that number in the 200s. 196 points the Buccaneers gave up. Like that defense was incredible. Um, and they won, like they breezed through the playoffs. They just dominated every team they played. So I came really close to putting them on, but at the end of the day,
Interesting.
offense was just too bad.
Yeah, interesting. I noticed the thing about their defense when I was doing research for it, but I didn't know enough about it to really give them serious thought. But I noticed it enough to obviously like remember
Um,
now that you've mentioned it, like seeing it. Oh yeah, they had a crazy defense.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
then my thing when you have, one side of the ball is historically good, the other side is just
mhm.
bad, is like all it takes is that, your defense just have one game that's
One
not
bad
great
game, yeah.
and you lose. Like you're losing. You know what I
Right,
mean? Whereas the 16 Patriots, they had a great offense, great defense. Offense can struggle and you still have a great shot at winning because your defense is so good, or vice versa.
right.
So to me, it's just you're a more versatile um, team. But yeah,
Yeah. So you had what was your remind me of your list?
yeah. So I had '09 Saints 5,
Hmm.
2017 Eagles 4,
Hmm.
'03 Pats at 3, '04 Pats at 2, 2016 Pats at 1.
Okay. What was it about '04 that had you put them above '03?
If you look at it, their offense was a lot better that year.
Hmm.
That was the biggest thing was
Okay.
their offense was top 5 in the NFL in scoring after being like not top 10 in
Hmm.
'03. Um,
Was that also a one versus one matchup in the Super Bowl where the Eagles won in the NFC? Because that Eagles team was really good.
yeah, I think so.
Um,
I
I
think
remember
so.
they were, I believe, yeah, they were the like best regular season record in that '02 season that the Bucks won, and then I think they were the best in the NFC
Uh,
in '03 maybe even.
yeah, yeah,
So they
yeah.
were. I remember seeing
Before they
them pop
were,
up and being
yeah,
like they were a crazy team at that
yeah,
time.
they were 13-3 in '04.
Okay.
2 games better than anyone else in the NFC.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So yeah, that's
yeah,
fair.
and they blew out 2 amazing teams in the playoffs to get to the
Playoffs.
Super Bowl. So
Yeah, that's fair. I probably should have considered the '04 Pats a little more. I don't know why that '03 team stuck out to me so much.
I don't know. I think most people think of them as just being the same.
Yeah,
You
that's what I
look,
was saying earlier. Like it's tough with these Patriots. Like when I was looking at, 14, 16, even 18 to an extent. Like you think of it because they've been branded so much as dynasties, it's you almost just think of that as like one
the
team.
same team. And I mean, if you look at the roster, it's virtually the same.
Hmm.
The only difference is they got a better running back in '04
Yeah.
also. So
Was that Dylan?
yeah,
Is he yeah.
yeah,
I had an action figure of him when I was younger.
he's
Very
good.
good
He
one.
was
Very
good.
good one actually. Like you could take the helmet off and like take the jersey off and like all kinds of stuff.
Classic.
Um, I had the 2020 Bucks at 5, the '09 Saints at 4, the 16 Pats at 3, the 13 Seahawks at 2, and the '07 Pats as my best team since we've been born, even though they did not win the Super Bowl.
Right. I like the list. I like it.
I thought that was going to be a hotter take than it turned out to be.
See
I
when you
just I just thought it was going to be like tough to justify having a not champion in there,
yeah,
but that
it's I
team
mean
was just
yeah, to me
crazy.
any team they went undefeated, started 18-0, which no team has ever done. So it's like I could understand the argument.
Yeah.
When you said it was a hot take, I got nervous because to me that was like a
Who did you think? Who did you think I was going for? Like
that's
what?
why I had no clue. I'm trying to think. I was like, are you gonna do like the 19 Chiefs, but it won over those other teams seemed
Yeah,
crazy. We had talked about too many teams, like, I knew a couple that weren't quite top
yeah.
five, and I was just like,
Who's this gonna be?
this is terrifying. So
Yeah,
yeah.
man. If the Bears had won in '06, maybe they would have gone on here just for Devin Hester.
All right, that's yeah. Now you're talking ridiculous.
That would have been awesome, dude. Devin
Oh my
Hester
gosh.
running back. The
That's
opening
the
kick.
worst team to make a Super Bowl in our lifetime by a mile, I think.
Talk about getting carried by a kick returner.